Welcome to the Artistry of Code podcast, where we, together with our guests, are seeking ways of doing things right and having fun with it.
Software, architecture, soft skills, teamwork, and other crazy buzzwords.
Are you ready? Let's bring more value to the business.
Hello guys, and welcome to the second episode of our podcast. We are still so excited after releasing the first episode, which, to be honest, at the time of this recording happened just less than a week ago. We are really happy to get all these likes and subscribes from you, so give us more. We want to give a big thank you to Marcin and Rafał, who spent quite some time giving us really detailed feedback. Thank you guys! The previous episode was oriented around soft skills and future plans. This time, we are going to lean towards more technical subjects. Today's topic includes the word which is probably the most beloved among developers, management, and customers alike: bugs. To begin with, let's quickly talk about last 2 weeks. Artur, anything interesting, exciting, or just boring recently?
Well, for me, it's almost 3 weeks actually of summary. I, as you probably already know, started a new journey in my career in the front end. So this first month of 2022 is actually onboarding. But I must say that it was the quickest onboarding I have ever had, because after 3 days of being in a new company, I started with development without any issues, and yeah, the pace is high, and that's what I actually very like about it, because I don't spend much time on reading lots of docs which I don't even understand. So the onboarding focused on work training, so I got to know all the quirks and interesting things that are related to the code itself, and I very like it. Yeah, and the other very exciting thing for me is fact that the continuous integration and continuous deployment solution is gonna be moved from the Bitbucket to the GitHub. So I will have a first opportunity so far for me to try GitHub Actions. And we all know that the CI tools, let's say, are divided some generations. Yeah, so far I have been using the first generation, which is Jenkins, and it's GUI related, setting jobs and continuous integration. We have the second generation, like GitLab CI or the pipelines in Jenkins, and now there comes the new with GitHub Actions, and I have been approved as a participant in this movement. Yeah, and I am very excited for that time. I can't wait till we start. Yeah, and you, especially you guys, because we were working together quite a long time, know that I am that type of guy that likes the DevOps stuff a lot.
Yeah, that's definitely your pond, I would say.
Yeah. So I am driven with this. I am driven with this idea that soon I will get to know something very new and exciting, and hopefully it will be sooner rather than later. Okay, Marek, tell us what your last 2 weeks were, and how are you?
I'm pretty good, a bit sick, but I'm struggling, and I'm doing my best to keep this recording good enough at least. But I have to say that I am really happy for you, Artur, to hear that, because I know you're a crazy fanboy of any CI tools, and I believe that you would love to implement CI/CD even in your fridge if it would be possible. And I bet it will be possible at some time, and you will do that.
I hope it's a good meaning of a fanboy, Marek.
Yeah, it's a good meaning, definitely. The last 2 weeks weren't too exciting, but other than keeping refreshing the statistics of downloads of our first episode, I was spending some time looking at the solution which I need for my side project, which is something to be used as the full text search. Fairly efficient, but also has to be as cost effective as possible. And just 10 seconds answer on this is that I discovered on top of Postgres full text search or Mongo Cloud Atlas search, which is also pretty cool if you would ever want to try it. I definitely recommend it, and it's crazy fast. It's built on top of Lucene, open source project. But I discovered just yesterday that Redis has a capability of providing the full text search, which is called the Redis module, which provides this functionality. Is called Redis Search. So quite surprising, but if it will be as fast as Redis, it's definitely worth trying, and I really want to try it soon. So I will probably share some thoughts and experience with you in the next episodes. Grzegorz, anything interesting last 2 weeks?
Whoa, guys, you've set up this scene in a way that I'm just going to look bad this time. The thing is that in like the 2 past weeks, I didn't open an editor, really. I didn't code neither at work or even after work, even though I have some subjects to work on besides the regular working hours. And that's mostly due to the fact that I'm transitioning to a different set of responsibilities at my current company at Fissmann. And this always includes a lot of, like knowledge transfers, responsibility transfers, setting up the handover tables, so which activities go to whom and from when. So yeah, the change of the set of responsibilities is actually related to a slight change of my role in the organization. So I'll be more involved in architectural topics than coding. So I'm really looking forward to it. This is going to bring new challenges. Some of them are similar from the past to the ones in the past, but I'm really looking forward to them. What I would like to highlight as an interesting point from the last 2 weeks is the article which was published on the blog from SNCC. The title of the article states, "Open source maintainer posts the plug on NPM packages, colors, and faker. Now what?" I was really surprised what people can do in order to manifest their disappointment with the big corporations and how they treat open source. I'm personally a fan of open source myself. I even wanted in the past, even at the very young age, to start something in the open source, but I really never managed to. I kind of feel the guy who did what he did. Essentially what he did was that he's maintaining a library called Colors. That's something which is used to have color fonts on like the terminal when you're building CLI applications. And the guy, in order to manifest his disappointment, he decided to commit an infinite loop in a patch version of the library, effectively rendering all the applications which were using this as unresponsive, CPU consuming, etc. So he kind of intentionally broke the applications this way. Well, I'm just curious how big the backlash will be, because we know that the Node.js, JavaScript, and NPM environments get a lot of criticism, and these kind of activities don't help, which I consider as a downside of the whole thing. The manifest is strong. His case, I believe, is strong as well, although the form was pretty extreme. So yeah, that's the highlight which I had on my mind.
My suggestion on this subject is to always fix your dependencies version, in this situation, package JSON. So you are always aware of any updates because you are doing them intentionally. So it can save your company and your projects.
Yeah, I think that we all learned the lesson after this one. Yeah, and the reactions in the environment of developers, I think, is very strong. Yeah, he's gonna be remembered for sure.
I think that this highlight actually sets the theme for the episode, doesn't it, Artur?
Yes, it is. And now we can proceed to our main topic about bugs. But to start with this topic, we actually need to have a definition of bug. Do you guys have maybe some kind of definition prepared? You can use only few words to describe it precisely.
I have one definition prepared, which is coming from Wikipedia, and I think we can bring this definition and think a moment about it. So the Wikipedia states that a software bug is an error, flaw, or fault in a computer program or system that causes it to produce an incorrect or unexpected result, or it behave in unintended ways. So this is just the first sentence. I am not going to read the whole Wikipedia page.
Well, on my end, I would define bug as something which is not a feature, this sort of a definition, although we might end up in discussing whether that's a bug or a feature somewhere in later in the episode or in a different one. But when it comes to me, in my personal opinion, I mostly agree with the definition on Wikipedia. It's quite broad. In essence, for me, bug is anything that the software shouldn't do according to the specified requirements or expectations set, either by the business or by the technology itself.
I have a feeling that we all have a common understanding what actually the bug is, and we don't need to specify anymore. I don't have any more input to all that you guys have said about the definition of bug. So maybe let's try to find out where do bugs come from actually.
There's quite a few ways, yeah, where the bugs can come from, and it's not that easy to define all of them at once. So yeah, first of all, we can, I think, blame ourselves as developers. We have to state that clearly. Developers often create bugs in the software, yeah? Hopefully unintentionally. Sometimes, as discussed just a minute ago, sometimes intentionally, but it shouldn't happen. Yeah, but yeah, I believe that developers are probably the most common source of the bugs. Or not, maybe not.
Probably it depends. Everything depends.
Yeah,
in reality.
Everything depends. Yeah.
Yeah, but I would say that agreement with your statement is an obvious thing. Yeah, developers do bugs, but I think that some, like Grzegorz said, the bug is always is not always a mistake in the implementation. Sometimes it's a flaw that comes from the inaccurate description of the design, yeah, or of the requirements that the functionality needs to meet. So I would blame also the whole team that is responsible for designing the solution, because usually it's the whole team, not only a single person. So I have seen a lot of times in my career the situation where team members were not focused on refinements, were not focused on other meetings regarding those introducing new features or changing the behavior of application. And that lack of focus in the end might lead in a different understanding on, or having holes in the idea behind changes we need to introduce. So sometimes it's also a flaw in the design that is provided to us. Someone just didn't think about some edge cases. And these all are situations that should be found on this brainstorming meetings.
Yeah, so the attention thing is definitely important, especially on the meetings, kind of formal ones where everybody should take care of that the requirements are really understood and use the collective knowledge. And this actually brings me to something which, Artur, you told me about a long time ago. You called it tribal knowledge, translating this to English. So what we mean by the tribal knowledge is that a set of people on a team, you have people which have been with the company from like 5 years, 1 year, 1 month, and people with the most experience probably will know most of the requirements from the past. So whenever there are new requirements coming to the product, they might remember about some important requirements so that they can challenge the new requirements and validate the new changes in the system against the known requirements. And this way, if the focus is there and the tribal knowledge is there, they can spot the logical bugs, right? So we're not changing the business rules in a way that this is contradicting with a requirement which we had in the past. The problem is that sometimes people don't have that focus, that sometimes we forget about some requirements from the past, and sometimes people leave the companies. So in this setup, we're kind of doomed because we are going to have these situations from time to time. Now, how I saw that big companies solve that, they're having a requirement management process, for instance, right? So you have systems where those requirements are specified, approved, verified, and then there are those big processes of change management. Wherever a new requirement comes in, there's a big group of responsible people who are going to check if those requirements are fitting all together, and then that the outcome is going to be something which is expected to work, let's say, right? But then again, we are used to work in small companies where those processes are not there, and that would actually kill the agility. So I think that ultimately we're always doomed to some extent. Those bugs will be always there this way. But this corresponds to what you said, that not all bugs come directly from like the code itself. Sometimes the requirements might be contradicting.
The thing which is coming to my mind when we are talking about these requirements and the unclarities there is the thing which I believe, and I've seen that in the past, is a pretty common issue, and it's so easy to avoid. Is that we as developers, we sometimes are afraid to ask because we don't want to seem stupid or unexperienced or anything like that. While we should always ask a question, even if we believe it's stupid, because there is no stupid questions in the world, and it can save a lot of time, a lot of money to everyone, to the business. It can save your time and your stress when something will happen later on because you did not ask. So yeah, that's what I always try to do. So first of all, understand everything which is related to the story or bug before doing any coding. So ask as many questions as needed to be 101% sure the full understanding is in place.
When it comes to the sources of the bugs, I have a couple of points on my mind, which I really would like to pass to you guys. So the example which we had for a bug happening, let's say out of nowhere, is the external library update, right? So that's the example with the colors library, or that's for the NPM, but anybody could experience this. So external libraries updates always carry a risk. So having like a solid test suite verifying the code could actually catch this in a CI/CD scenario. Besides that, in general, that's the backward compatibility breaking changes, right? Sometimes we depend on services from like third parties. We integrate towards like GitHub, we integrate towards APIs of, I don't know, like Atlassian, whoever. And at some point, I'm not saying that those companies did that, but it might be the case that a non-backward compatible change will be introduced, and that's going to trigger a bug on your end. Now, this requires like careful coverage of tests on its own. Another interesting source for bugs for me is coming from race conditions. Now, we've worked with systems which are messaging based. A lot of messages are being processed in parallel, and sometimes bad coding decisions regarding that parallel or concurrent processing leads to race conditions arising, right? So this is the situation where we were expecting a message B to arrive after message A or be processed after message A, but either due to the code issue or a performance issue on the infrastructure, the messages are processed out of order, which is leading to a bug, right? Meaning the outcome is not desired over there. And that's super important if your system is using things like eventual consistency, or it has that eventual consistency component, because there the race conditions can be very, very often, and they are very, very hard to tackle. And then, guys, I think the next question which should be answered is, what does it mean to fix a bug? What do you guys think?
For me, the most crucial part to start fixing a bug is to understand it. To understand it, we need to know when it has been introduced. We need to understand why it is there. So the reproduction of that bug made on the developer machine or in some environment where we have more control, more information like logs is crucial. So this is the most important thing at the very beginning. Then, of course, we need to validate if it's actually a bug or a feature, or it's a flaw in the design that someone hasn't just thought about this use case, this edge case, and we need to either just fix the bug because it's very easy to understand how to do it, or we should just do another brainstorming with others, with the designers of the feature, with the people that bring us the requirements, how this situation should be settled. Then comes the development, and from my perspective, it's quite easy. Yeah, we need to make it work as required.
Yeah, I believe that answering the question, is it a bug or a feature, is not always that easy and straightforward, because it happens that, and I think most of us experienced it in the past. It will happen mostly when the developer who developed a feature is handling a bug related to that feature, and then he or she is able to challenge the bug and say that it was developed accordingly to the requirements, yeah. And then we suddenly getting into the topic which we just already discussed. when we discover that the developer is correct, that the thing was and the feature was developed accordingly to the requirements, but now the business or the product reports a bug because they thought it should be done differently, but they didn't stated it clearly in the requirements, and that led to the bug, which is exactly what we told at the beginning of this episode, that the requirements are like the crucial thing.
So from the perspective of a person who was forming requirements for the team and the teams, I might not be the role model here, but just to stand in defense, kind of, is that I frequently see and know that at a time when we are specifically working in agile methodologies, when the requirements are pretty vague at the very beginning, we have the notion of the direction, but we don't necessarily know where we are going to end up, like at the end of the day, when that particular bit has been implemented. It's for the developers, I would say, to have that curiosity in them. To be brave enough to ask those questions. You've said this today, that sometimes we lack this, let's call it bravery, but it's not really bravery or courage to ask that question. But I frequently found myself explaining to some people which I've worked with that, okay, if you're in doubt, then don't make the assumption, I'm here for you. So we can talk about this whenever you're asking yourself the question, okay, should this be solved this way or that way? What should happen after this happens? It's really okay to reach out to your product owner, to your team lead. They may know the answer, and most likely, you will avoid a bug or a misunderstanding of the requirements because you will get the clarification on the spot. And if the answer is not going to be available immediately, I would assume that the person you're going to is going to know the right person who's going to provide the answer here.
I keep hearing that asking question thing, and it brings the memory which I have and want definitely to share, where I was discussing some time ago, just with a cup of coffee with someone, about the skills which make a senior developer. Yeah, and we often think that asking the question is the thing which belongs to the junior developers. Yeah, because when someone is fresh in the industry, they will ask and ask and ask. Hopefully, they will ask because they should. But in the end, the asking the right questions is a really important skill for any senior developer, because as we already said it many times today, if the questions are not asked, it costs money and it costs time. So yeah, we should keep our focus on asking proper questions all the time, probably.
So we covered how to get to a solution, right? So where we have a doubt, when we don't understand the bug, we outlined what can be done by us, by our listeners, in order to narrow down the way this has to be solved. Now, the other part of the job is actually to debug it and solve it, right? So I'm curious what kind of techniques you guys had to employ in order to sort out a bug. Just for me, for an instance, I frequently found out that whenever you're hit by a bug, and that's a pesky one, very difficult to catch, this always leads to multiple releases, even to production, in order to add additional logging, some tracing, so that we gather more and more information about the details, how the system operates in certain conditions, so that these bugs can be actually reproduced, so that we have enough information available. So like just one of the examples. Do you guys have any techniques which our listeners can employ in order to have a successful resolution of a bug?
So the thing which I am always starting with when fixing the bug is to create a test case which reproduces the bug. Usually in the smallest context as possible. So if it's possible, just a small unit test or 2 of them if necessary. But it's, as we know, not always possible. Sometimes the bugs are about some integration, but they have a broader scope. So yeah, it can lead to creating like really almost end-to-end tests sometimes. But yeah, if the bug is important and we want to secure the fix so no one in the future will break it in some different way than it was broken this time, yeah, write the test, see that it is failing, and then try to fix it. So yeah, I'm talking about TDD now, but I definitely think in terms of bugs, it's definitely worth to work in this manner.
Except for TDD, I very liked to use the debugger. It's a very handy tool, and I think that people should not be afraid of them, because in the history of my work as a developer, I remember a lot of situations where other developers prefer to use some kind of technique. They were putting the logs everywhere in the code with some characteristic word inside. Usually it was like explicit word, and these logs like were produced in the log, so they didn't know how the flow of the application was, how the data was coming through all those functions, classes, etc. But this solution can bring another bug to the system, which is like leaving those explicit words, or even not explicit but unwanted words somewhere in the system. So I prefer debugger. It's very cool. For Node that we all work recently, that debugger works, I would say, perfectly when you run the application locally, when you run it on the Docker container, either also when you run it in the cloud on some virtual machine or Kubernetes pod. That works like a charm, and I encourage you to try out the profiler when you hit the situation where when the standard methods and tests can't help, because when it comes to the situation that you, Marek, mentioned about and Grzegorz about distributed systems and all this race conditions. It's usually very difficult to prepare a test case that would cause the issue. It's also very difficult to reproduce the error. So in that situation, we need to be observed, be detailed, and try our best using the best tools that we have.
So when I'm listening to you guys, I kind of feel like you enjoy working with bugs. Am I right?
I would say yes. It's much more interesting than introducing some simple features to the system.
Like implementing the e-commerce cart for 100th time in a row.
Yeah, I have to admit that I enjoy working with bugs, at least to some degree. Maybe after working too long with bugs alone, I am getting a bit sad because I want to develop something fresh and new and sparky. Yeah, but I definitely agree with the companies which tend to put the newcomers on the bugs, because I keep seeing the bugs as the fixing the bugs as the best way of learning how the system works. So if you are missing the documentation, if you are missing the knowledge in the team, which obviously never happened, we all know that it's never the case. Fixing the bugs is the best way to learn the system, because you will have to go through whole code many times if you will run the debugger, and as Artur mentioned, and you will use the step over or even worse, the step into button. It will lead through to the darkest places of the code, which you didn't ever know that they existed. And you will have to understand what is going on there, because it will show that the output from that function is somehow wrong, and you have to fix a place which you totally didn't suspect that the bug is caused by that.
Yeah, so some of the bugs can be really pearls, I would say, for me, because in bugs I see a lot of opportunities. Now, frequently in the past, I stumbled upon the situation that there was a bug which was very difficult to trace, debug, reproduce, and fix. And the changes required in order to fix that particular bug, which is, like something which seems to be a one-day issue in the morning, at the end of the day, is a story worth a whole 2-week sprint, because the changes are very deep, the changes required. And I see this as an opportunity, because sometimes we as developers come into the situation where we have to negotiate with the business some of the changes which are required for the system to operate in an improved way. And bugs create an opportunity to introduce the changes as part of providing the fix for the bug. So you don't have to go into these negotiations in order to improve the system, because you can do it all along the way, and everyone is okay with that.
Yeah, to put some example on what you said, I think that one of the best one is introducing the traceability, for example, to your system, so you can trace the whole flow of data in different use cases. I know that those solutions for distributed tracing are very expensive. Yeah, just to give you an example of which one is the very costly. For example, App Insight. Yeah, but when you have the bug that is very hard to tackle without it, and you don't know what actually is going on inside, and this bug is with high severity, then the probability that the business will let you introduce the tracing raises. Yeah, so it's an opportunity for sure. And guys, remember to take that opportunity.
I would say that every business and every company should treat these kind of tools, which you are Artur mentioning, like the monitoring, the traceability, logging tools, as kind of insurance. So we should always do our best to get the insurance as soon as possible before anything happens. So we are on this good side from the very, very beginning.
Yeah, that's true. I wanted to say also that we shouldn't expect that people will understand the value of behind all those sophisticated tools that we use for today, but all of us actually can interpret in a good way the number of bugs and their severity that we have in the system. Yeah, so even people that are not quite technical can see that we have a vast of major issues in the system, and now we're going to the topic how actually to keep it under control, the number of bugs, their severity, how to fix them as soon as possible, or how to manage the time of fixing them to make the most value from our business. Do you guys know some methods, techniques, maybe ways of working to keep it under control?
So the thing which I frequently did with the teams in the past was at some point reserving some of the capacity to reduce the number of outstanding bugs in the backlogs. So we were monitoring the number of the bugs growing, and at some point this started to be unbearable. You couldn't ignore that situation over time. So then we explained to proper people that we need to spend more time on fixing those in order to solve our customers' problems. And I never got a no on that. It was always a matter of figuring how much of our capacity in terms of whatever unit you use, man days, story points, whatever you would like to dedicate to that. And that's just one of the ways. Nowadays, we simply have a checkpoint on our planning checklist to view the bug backlog or the bugs in the backlog and pick the ones which are the most relevant for us. And that became part of our planning procedure for each and every sprint. And really that's something which I would recommend doing to everyone. Just always try to incorporate a couple of them into the scope of your iteration if you're working in a iterative mode. And then give them the same priority as any other item on the backlog. Obviously, the business always values some of the user stories which they bring more, and that they most likely are contributing to the sprint goal. But then again, having a small bullet point on your checklist for the planning, do our services have some reported bugs? Will be able to fix some of those bugs and provide value to the customer? If yes, it always doesn't hurt to get some of them in, especially that there's typically no such expectation that bugs will be delivered within a sprint as it is for the user stories, right? So frequently you can find yourself in a situation that the team already did all the stories. Probably it doesn't make sense to pull new stories from the future, so then you have the bugs to accommodate the spare capacity. So these are like the three ways I was doing this in the past with the teams. What about your experiences, guys?
I remember the way of handling bugs from my experience that we in one team tried to have some kind of role of that was passed each and every sprint to another one, and this role was about handling bugs. And maybe it's not gonna be an idea how to cope with it, but I would say how to not try to cope with bugs. So some kind of anti-pattern, which how I see this bug resolving role, because over time I saw that after some time people just started to treat this role as some kind of penalty. Yeah, they were not having fun about it, they were forced to do it, and I think that's an anti-pattern that you guys shouldn't follow, because people will not like their time spent on something that they are forced to.
I would use this opportunity to mention a thing which definitely resonates with what you guys said. And this is the business metric which is about the bugs. And I believe it's definitely worth to implement and to monitor. And it's basically the number of open bugs for the team. And it will obviously work only for the team's setup where when there is no bug team, let's say, or the maintenance team, which is a bit scaled up bug person solution, which Artur mentioned. So when every team has its own bugs on the backlog, we can definitely monitor if the total number of bugs is growing or it's being kept under control. Yeah, we should set up some number which never should be exceeded, and maybe in case it's being hit, we should focus whole effort of the team on fixing the bugs for a moment, so we can get back green, let's say. Yeah, definitely we should always monitor if there's more fixed bugs than the new ones. So it's always the value for the business.
Yeah, Marek, you've just reminded me about the very important thing when you said about the maintenance team. There is a thing which some companies tend to do, which I would really like to emphasize as an anti-pattern, really, is to have a team which is like producing features and a team which is fixing bugs only or making corrections. So this kind of a setup is bringing very bad polarity into both teams, really. They tend to quickly start hating one another, and if you ever end up in even considering such a setup, please don't do it. For the sake of the people working on both teams, don't do it. That's a highway to hell. You don't want it. You really don't want it. Been there, so that you don't want it.
In regards to what you said, Marek, about this metric for each team, it reminded me that if we want really to reduce the number of bugs in the product, and then we need to make sure that this, let's say, function, that is drawn on the chart by this metric is coming to a zero. Yeah, so with every next week or every next sprint, we're having less and less bugs, and to make it, we need to do it like with the treatment of diseases. Yeah, because we should focus not only on resolving the bugs that we have, but if we see that there are beginning to be more and more of them, we should start treating the cause, not only the effects of and the effect, I mean the bugs that are coming. So if you see that the quality in the product is not delivered because we're not having enough tests, we're not having a test pipeline, we're not having a test pyramid implemented in the right way, maybe we are missing some checks in our development process, maybe there are other flaws in the way we work. We should think how to reduce them in the future, so then we can have more time to over the upcoming weeks to solve that backlog of bugs. Just to prioritize them, which has the most severity, and make sure that each and every week that will be coming will not deliver another big chunk of bugs. So remember, guys, always think about treating the cause rather than treating the effects.
The thing which you just said, that keeping the number of open bugs to zero or as close to zero as possible is the best closing sentence for this episode, which is already pretty long, but we hope it was enjoyable and interesting. I believe we touched many different topics, and we want you guys, our dear listeners, to tell us which points were most interesting for you. What difficulties or opportunities do you see with the working with the bugs, fixing them, and anything related to bugs or managing the bugs? Let us know in the comments under this episode on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or wherever you're listening to us. If you want, you can send us an email at podcast@artistryofcode.com. It's podcast@artistryofcode.com. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's all for today. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Visit our page on Facebook and Twitter, leave us a comment under the episode, subscribe to the updates, and share it with others.
We would like to hear your feedback so that we can prepare more interesting content for you to enjoy. Hear you next time!